All right, let's talk Sentry Box planning for safety. So here's the thing. Benjamin Franklin said this experiment for the Sentry Box was safe. However, we have a death that occurred from it, namely Georg Wilhelm Rickman, who performed a version of the experiment, and he died when lightning struck the rod. Now, but let me read to you the description from Benjamin Franklin's book titled Experiments and Observations in Electricity, dated 1751. He states, to determine the question whether the clouds that contain lightning are electrified or not, I would propose an experiment to be tried where it may be done conveniently. On the top of some high tower or steeple, place a sentry box big enough to contain a man and an electrified stand. From the middle of the stand, let an iron rod sit and pass bending out the door, and then upright 20 or 30 feet, pointed very sharp at the end. If the electrified stand be kept clean and dry, a man standing on it when such clouds are passing low might be electrified and afford sparks. The rod drawing fire to him from a cloud. If any danger to the man should be apprehended, though I think there should be none, let him stand on the floor of this box, and now and then bring near to the rod the loop of a wire that has one end fastened to the leads, he holding it by a wax handle to the sparks. If the rod is electrified, will strike to the rod to the wire and not affect him. So what's the difference? Wilhelm Rickman performed a similar experiment with a wax handle. Lightning struck the rod and he died. What's the difference? The key here is that Benjamin Franklin called for the sentry box to be placed high, whether it would be on a tower or a steeple. So he has a wire rod that's going out of his sentry box that's about 20 or 30 feet tall. But however, this whole box is already sitting on top of a tower, which maybe we call that another 20 to 30 feet, depending on what you would call the average height of a tower or a church steeple at a time. So this is going to be a structure where the person that's in the box is going to be insulated from ground, because these old structures don't have the lightning rods that Benjamin Franklin would later develop with the same idea. So you basically have a huge insulating layer between the sentry box and the man to ground. This would be very much akin to a bird sitting on a power line and why they don't get electrocuted. There's not a ground path that the current will flow through them into the ground. So there's no ground path for the individual to be electrified. So basically, let's think about this. This is a situation, it's a little bit different from Tesla's experiment, which actually calls for a capacitor so the ground is brought to and close to the insulated rod. So let's draw this. All right, let's get a comprehension. So let's call this our tower. Right? Benjamin Franklin has his box where a man would sit inside on a stool, and that stool would go out, and this is your antenna. Let's just put it a symbol for antenna. There is no ground in this experiment. So this is a huge insulating layer to earth ground. Let's just call this earth right here, right way down here. So this is all insulating material. So we can call this like a huge, if we wanted to like draw this out like the capacitor, it'd be like this, right? So it'd be like this. But this right here, this is a super, super low capacitance, because this plate would be 30 feet away from each other. This would be huge, right? So that's effectively what that would be in this scenario. Very large insulating plate, right? Very large insulating layer. Georg Wilhelm Rickman, though, was inspired by a French version of the same experiment where they took, let me move this camera, where they took a table and 3 wine bottles. That's the difference. Just 3 wine bottles, and then that was going to the earth. So this is the same setup as this, but the capacitor dimensions are completely different. This right here is ground. That's effectively what that is. It's the difference between a capacitor. Let me just draw this. Let's exaggerate the scale of this. So this capacitor, so you can hardly call that a diagram because it's so far apart. So this is a capacitor with a much larger insulator within it. This is a capacitor with a very small insulator. And then compare that to Nikola Tesla's patent, back in the day when they called these condensers. So his was basically, you had a metal plate going to the old school condenser symbols look like this, right? That's the old school capacitor. So basically, that's essentially antenna, capacitor, ground. And that's basically what we're looking at here. So when we're comparing, this is, let's see, that's Tesla, Franklin. Oops, what the heck? What the frick? This is all backwards. What am I doing? I'm not going to use any words. No words. Words are banned. We don't use words. Words are banned, and plus I don't write them very well. All right, so here's the difference. This is what killed Georg Wilhelm Richtmann, right? This is a capacitor with a very small insulator, very close to ground. Even though he was standing off to the side, so he had another wire coming off, or not here. Or was it? It was to the stool, right? The wire he was holding. So this plate right here kind of acts as a counterpoise in a way. So this builds up charge, and there's going to be a charge difference here, however much. Or the other thing he could have been doing, because that's what Benjamin Franklin said to do. What he could have been doing was his rod that he was using might have been connected to ground, and he was holding just a small, just call it another capacitor, a wax capacitor, wax, and the other side of that plate was him. And then he was grounded. So that's what killed Georg Wilhelm Richtmann, this kind of setup. While Benjamin Franklin, he would have been correct. Had Georg followed his instructions and placed the Sentry Box in a tower, he would not have died from the lightning strike. So this is a safety this is one of the things that I needed more room to I'm probably not going to build a tower, but likely take the principle of what's needed for capacitor. I'm probably not going to do this where I'm going to, I don't trust that quite yet. I think I'd rather have an enclosed way of putting charge on my own body, like I have with the Van de Graaff. So with this, we'll just have to experiment what we can do to get, the goal is basically to recreate Nikola Tesla's ideas, which were basically just putting any kind of things in parallel to this, right? Kind of like an essentially here is that he had called for a spark gap to help protect the capacitor, and then whatever devices you want to put off in parallel. So this is what we want to accomplish, but this is the history leading up to Nikola Tesla. I'm not sure if Nikola Tesla was aware of this other stuff. I'm sure he should have been, but this is the patent idea that Nikola Tesla put forth. So, but understanding this history is important for understanding the safety involved in the Sentry Box experiment and making sure that you are not copying Georg Wilhelm Richtmann's version of the experiment based on the French design. There is a name for this. You can probably find it if you Google it. I don't have their names memorized off the top of my head. Anyway, have a good one.